For some people, life begins with a name. For others, life really starts only when they let go of their old names. And this story began in a jarring silence, at the very moment when everything left from the past was shattered on a morning when the sky's color matched someone's name. That morning, Mia, the youngest of 4 abandoned siblings, fell to the ground as she tried to run after her mother, and her mom didn't look back even once. The lives of these 4 kids were split in two by a man's angry glare and a woman's worn-out hands. Martin and Claudia yelled at each other for years, tied together by poverty and regret, but behind them, all they left their kids waiting by a battered door was a shadow. The oldest, Lucas, stood over his younger siblings with an expression that held neither anger nor hope. Next to him was Emma, her hair a mess, her clothes torn, her eyes lost, and her face empty of anything left from childhood. She held the youngest, 3-year-old Mia, while right beside them, Ben clung to his mother in fear. The door closed slowly. Footsteps faded. The squeak of a wagon grew distant. And all that was left was 4 kids, a handful of cold ashes, and a last name they didn't even want. Mia's cry "Mom, don't leave me," just drifted off into the wind. That night, Lucas gathered the last bits of firewood. Emma wrapped her siblings in an old shawl that had belonged to their mom. Ben silently held his big brother's hand. And Mia, crying quietly, stared at the sky and felt a huge, wordless loneliness. When morning came, a man showed up outside the house. He was a farmer who kept to himself, ignored town gossip, and lived alone, his hands rough with calluses. Maximilian Bauer. His eyes lingered on the kids for a moment. He didn't say anything, didn't ask any questions. He just slowly took off his hat and bowed his head. "You guys okay?" he asked. Lucas didn't answer. Neither did Emma. She just stared at Max, like she was afraid to say her own name out loud. "I have a name, but that last name doesn't belong to me anymore," Lucas said quietly. Max's face didn't change. He wasn't surprised, not even for a second. In his eyes, something long gone flickered. Was it kindness, or the shadow of a family he'd lost? Then he turned and left without a word. That night, under the broken porch, the kids huddled together, shivering from hunger. Emma put her hand on Mia's head. Lucas tried to get a fire going, but all he got was smoke, not flame. Loneliness, cold, and hunger pressed down on them like a heavy blanket. But before dawn, something was different by the door. There was an old cloth sack inside it, some fresh bread, a bottle of water, and a bit of dried meat. No clue who left it, but for the first time, hope flickered in Emma's eyes. The next morning, a stack of dry firewood on the doorstep. The day after, a thin blanket. Then, a pair of old but sturdy boots and a little knife beside them. At first, the siblings wondered if this help was some kind of trap, but soon, they realized whoever was helping them meant no harm. And every night, Max's horse tracks disappeared right in front of their door. One night, Lucas hid in the shadows of the porch to wait for the person helping them. He saw how quietly, how carefully Max approached, never leaving anything until he was sure the kids were asleep. One night, Lucas couldn't hold back and asked, "Why are you doing this?" Max's voice echoed in the dark. "Because somebody has to." Lucas looked down. "We don't even have a name anymore," he whispered. Max said, "Names aren't important. But one day, you'll pick the right one for yourself," and walked away. After that, the kids gratefully accepted whatever Max brought, but they never asked for more. Above all, they put each other first. They shared, never acted selfishly. Emma gave her food to Mia. Lucas kept watch at night. But they learned that life isn't just about little acts of kindness. When, the next day, the sky turned steel gray and strangers appeared on the path beside their house. As the morning tried to break through the gray clouds, the 4 siblings woke up to a new day, or at least, to the hope that yesterday was finally over. Emma held Mia close, trying to keep her warm, while Lucas had barely slept at all through the night. His hands were covered in little cuts, his fingertips stained with soot, but his eyes were still full of life. Ben, even in his sleep, clung nervously to his sister's dress. The rundown house felt less like a shelter now and more like a graveyard of memories. And that morning, something unexpected happened. The kids, used to Max's quiet help, found not just a sack of supplies by the porch this time, but also a note. The handwriting was shaky and short. "I'll be coming today." There was no signature, but Lucas could sense Max's familiar, reassuring seriousness in every word. even though he always tried to hide it. The hours crawled by, filled with excitement and worry. Ben stared out the door, jumping at every sound. Mia chewed the end of Emma's shawl, and Lucas couldn't sit still. Around noon, the earthy smell of the road and the sound of hooves drifted over, and finally, Max appeared. He wasn't alone. With him was a woman, dressed in old but clean clothes, Max's childhood friend, Clara, who used to be the town nurse. Clara tried to smile at the kids at first, but her eyes carried the hard truth and the weariness of many years. Max's arrival changed the mood right away. It was clear he was there not just to help, but to demand answers. "Has your father or mother come back?" he asked Lucas, straight out. "No," Lucas answered, his voice steady. Max narrowed his eyes and looked the house over. "This place is about to fall apart. You can't stay here, but I can't just leave you. Clara will watch over you for a while, and I'll stick around too." Emma eyed Max suspiciously for a second. "Why are you helping us?" Max paused before answering. "Sometimes, you don't find your family, you become one. Only people who've been abandoned really understand that." For the rest of the day, Clara tidied up the house and took care of the kids' wounds. She cleaned up Ben's old scrape, cooked Mia a warm soup. Meanwhile, Max tried to patch up the house outside, boarding up the windows, fixing leaks in the roof. But by late afternoon, when dark shapes appeared on the horizon, it was clear their kindness would be put to the test. This time, the distant road brought a different kind of visitor, their father Martin's creditors. There were two big men with threatening stares, and a third, thin-faced man with a shifty look you could spot a mile away. They had chains, ropes, and heavy bags, like they'd come to drag 4 orphans away into some new kind of misery. As soon as Max saw them, he grabbed his old hunting rifle, and Clara rushed the kids into the back room. The door banged loudly. One of the men yelled, "Come out. There's nobody left to pay your father's debts. This house is ours now." Even though Lucas was scared, he stood tall next to Max. Max cracked the door and stared down the men. "This isn't a grave, and you're not undertakers. If you want to harm these kids, you'll have to get through me first," he said. The leader grinned. "You can't stop us, old man." Max stared him down. "Anyone who wants to try is welcome," he shot back. Just then, as Clara tried to sneak the kids out the back window, one of the men spotted them. Another guy burst out the door, lunging at Clara. But for the first time, Emma didn't freeze in fear for her sister. She moved with courage, grabbing a piece of old wood and swinging it at the man. He stumbled, and Clara dragged the kids away. The house turned chaotic for a few minutes, glass shattering, people yelling, men fighting outside. Max paused for a second and looked at Lucas. "Take your siblings and follow Clara. Whatever happens, don't look back," he said. Lucas scooped up Ben, and Emma pulled Mia as they ran for the backyard. Clara led them through the bushes and toward the woods. That night, Clara and the kids watched the distant glow of their burning house as they finally made it to Max's hidden storage shed. Everyone's faces showed exhaustion and fear. But for the first time in his life, Lucas found himself asking the hardest question he'd ever faced. Can a person really choose their own family? And as Mia cried quietly in the corner, Emma stroked her hair. "Maybe Max was right," Emma whispered. "Maybe one day, we'll get to choose our own name." But by morning, everything left from their old life was gone, nothing but ashes. Now, there was a new name waiting for them, a new life, and a road they'd never traveled before. That first night under the shadows of the forest was a turning point for the kids. They were completely exhausted. Clara covered Mia with a handful of dry leaves and a small blanket, rubbed Emma's hands to keep her warm, and quietly sat next to Lucas to ease the worry in his eyes. Max stood guard through the darkness, alone, his hands resting on his gun. When morning came, Max found the family looking like they were lost in the woods. "From now on, we stick together," he said. From that day on, Max's little farm became their new safe haven. The kids barely talked those first few days. Emma started helping with just about everything around the farm. Lucas hauled water for the horses, Ben cleaned the stables, and Mia never let go of Clara's skirt. With time, their fear slowly turned into curiosity and a faint sense of trust. Max woke up early every morning to make them breakfast, and in the evenings he'd light a fire in the barn and just sit with them in silence. Clara taught the kids how to write their names, how to count, and helped heal old wounds inside and out. But the peace didn't last long. One day, a letter arrived at the farm and turned everything upside down again. There was a familiar old handwriting on the envelope. Martin, their father, writing from some faraway town, saying he couldn't pay his debts and wanted his kids back. As Max's eyes darkened, Clara quietly handed the letter to Lucas. "Your father wants you to come back," she said. Lucas's lips started to tremble. Emma looked down at the floor, and Ben just stared off into the distance like he didn't understand. Max spoke short and clear. "No one can make you go anywhere you don't want to. Life is more than just a name. Sometimes, family isn't about blood, it's about the pain and hope you share." That night, for the first time, the kids sat at Max's table, placed their hands on top of his, and prayed together. Mia whispered softly, "So, are we going to be Bauers now?" Max smiled gently. "It's not names that make a family, it's what's in your heart. But if you want, you can pick a new last name." And from that moment on, the kids finally felt like they had the power to make choices for their own lives. That morning, there was a new kind of buzz around Max's farm. For the first time, the kids felt both excited and scared at the thought of choosing a name for themselves. Emma wrote everyone's names, one by one, on a page from an old notebook. "Who are we?" Lucas asked, biting his lip. Mia said, "We're people who have each other." And Ben added, "We're Max's family." In the end, they wrote Bauer in big letters in the notebook for the first time. The weight of a name didn't scare them. Just then, a cloud of dust rose up on the farm road. A group of riders was heading straight for them. Without a second thought, Max told the kids and Clara to get to the barn. The riders were Martin's men. Their leader spoke up with a sly grin. "They're their father's blood. We're here to take what's ours. You come with us now, or this house burns." Lucas stepped forward, swallowing his fear. "We've chosen our own family. We want to stay here." And Emma shouted, "We don't belong to anyone anymore." Max stood his ground in front of the men, holding his rifle in one hand and shielding the kids with the other. "If you try to hurt these children again, you'll have to get through me first," he said firmly. There was a moment of silence. One of the men tried to threaten Max, but right then, the other townspeople started to show up one by one. Women returning from the fields, old men, and young folks gathered around the farm and stood with Max. "These kids are staying here," said the oldest person in town. "This is their home now," said another. Martin's men saw the crowd and the determination in their eyes and backed down. Their leader spat angrily, got back on his horse, and growled, "This isn't over," as they rode away. That evening, for the first time, the kids realized they weren't alone. They didn't just have Max, but the whole heart of the town behind them. That night, Emma looked up at the stars and whispered, "Maybe destiny isn't written in blood, but in hope." After that night, all the tension and fear slowly faded away from both the stones of the farm and the faces of the kids. Max and Clara started to build a new routine with them. Lucas swept the barn in the mornings and worked in the fields at night, while Emma and Ben helped Clara in the kitchen. Mia never left Max's side, always feeding the chickens with her tiny hands and trying to help with anything she could. They weren't just trying to survive anymore for the first time, they were actually living. As the days passed, the kids changed. The fear in Emma's eyes turned into curiosity. The anger on Lucas's shoulders became determination. Ben stopped having nightmares as often. Mia woke up smiling every morning. And as Max watched them, he no longer felt that emptiness he'd carried when he was alone. One day, a new teacher came to town. Everyone was wondering, will the Bauer kids be enrolled in school too? Max and Clara sat down with the kids and asked, "Do you want to go to school? Do you want to learn?" Lucas's eyes lit up as he nodded, and Emma, a little nervous but hopeful, agreed too. That day, Max and Clara turned an old barn into a classroom. For the first time, the kids sat at their own desks and wrote their names with their new last name. Emma Bauer, Lucas Bauer, Ben Bauer, Mia Bauer. Other kids from town joined them too. Kids who'd been through similar pain, who knew what it meant to be accepted, learned it for real here. Soon after, Max hung a big wooden sign over the barn door with just one word: family. Everyone in the village understood then the Bauer family was real, and nothing would ever tear them apart again. That night, for the first time, everyone sat around the fire, praying together at the same table. This is our home now. But life doesn't just end when you get a new name and a new home. Somewhere out there, in the darkness, a shadow was still watching the Bauer kids. Martin's men hadn't fully given up yet. And to truly become a real family, they'd have to pass one last test of courage. Bisemed. Mornings that felt like spring brought new life to the Bauer family's farm. Emma, Mia, and Ben had gotten used to school, and Lucas carried the pride of working in the fields on his shoulders. For Max and Clara, for the first time in their lives, their days were filled with the peace that comes from finally being a real family. But just when it seemed like everything was finally okay, the real storm hit. One morning, a stranger walked into town. He wore a sharp but worn-out suit and carried a sealed envelope in his hand. When Max met him at the door, the man introduced himself. "I'm an official. There's a new will regarding the inheritance of Martin and Claudia." The news echoed all over the town square. The Bauer kids were nervous, and the townspeople gathered with a mix of anger and curiosity. The official opened the envelope, put on his glasses, and read aloud. "In the final part of Martin's life, all of his fortune and land is legally left to his heirs, the Bauer children. But there's one condition. The children's last name must officially be Bauer, and they must stay loyal to their new family." Suddenly, every eye turned to the Bauer kids, and Max Lucas stepped forward, his eyes filled with tears, but his voice steady. "We chose each other. We're never going back," he said. Emma, Mia, and Ben stood tightly behind their brother. Max's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't say a word. Just when everyone thought it was over, the biggest shock came. The official pulled out a second document. And one last note. Martin left a confession just before his death. One of the children, the youngest, Mia, is actually the lost daughter of the Bauer family. Max's baby who disappeared years ago. A heavy silence fell over everyone. Max's face went pale, and then tears welled up in his eyes. Clara put her hand on his shoulder. Suddenly, Mia ran to Max and hugged him tight. "You're my dad, aren't you?" Mia whispered. Max dropped to his knees, holding Mia in his arms as he sobbed. "My sweet girl, I never knew, but I've been loving you in my heart all along," he said. Whispers turned into applause and tears in the town square. Now, both blood and heart belonged to the same family. From that day on, the Bauer family's home became the symbol of the town. Lucas, Emma, and Ben officially took the Bauer name. Mia finally had the peace of finding her real father. Max and Clara started a brand new life with their children. And on the wooden sign at the entrance to the farm, there was once only one word: family. Now, written beneath it in golden letters, it said, "Sometimes true bonds are made of blood, but the real family is the one you choose together." As the sun set, the happy voices of the Bauer family echoed through the streets of the town. And everyone knew that loneliness or fear would never rule in that house again. Because in this story, a last name changed not just the past but the future, too.